Hey everybody, it's me, Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie. On this episode of CD Junkie, I am going to be talking about one of my favorite bands. I always say that because I always mean it. From the UK during the early 80s, but this band was actually around beginning in the 70s. And the band I'm talking about is Ultravox. Now, I'm only going to cover a certain period of their career, and I'm calling it, of course, the Midge Ure years. Now, Midge Ure is my third favorite vocalist of all time, after Elvis Presley and Tim Finn. And I've loved his solo work, which I'm not going to discuss. I'm only discussing Ultravox featuring Midge Ure. No solo projects, no Visage. Those I cover on separate videos. But I always like to start off these videos by telling you how I got into the band, and that's because sometime in 1980, I stayed up on a Friday night to watch some, music videos, probably on Night Flight or something, a show like that. And I was just watching these shows, and all of a sudden, these videos came on by this band I'd never heard called Ultravox. And it was the video to Sleepwalk, the video to Passing Strangers, and the video to Vienna. I loved them all, and I instantly got that album, fell in love with the band, and I've been a fan ever since. That's going on 43 years. Now, I did eventually dip back into their earlier career where John Foxx was the vocalist, and I love John Foxx as a solo artist, but I wasn't as enthused by that period of Ultravox. Although I love it, it just didn't grab me like the Midge Ure years. Now, Ultravox actually started in 1974. Now, you had John Foxx on vocals, you had Chris Cross on bass, you had Warren Kahn on drums, you had Billy Currie on keyboards, and I think Stevie Shears was a guitar player on the first two albums that came out in 77. And then Stevie Shears left the band, and then Robin Simon took over on guitar, and then Robin Simon and John Foxx left the band. That left Billy Currie, Chris Cross, and Warren Kahn to find a guitar player and a vocalist. And luckily in Midge Ure, they found both in one. An incredibly gifted artist. He was already in a glam band called Slick. He'd been in a post-punk band called the Rich Kids, and he played with Tin Lizzy. But in 1980, Billy Currie and Midge Ure met. I believe they were working on early Visage recordings, and Billy Currie asked Midge Ure to come and work with him and the remaining members of Ultravox. And the result was the 1980 release called Vienna. An incredible album. It's moody, it's melodic. A lot of people call them new romantic, but they're and they're not exactly synth pop because there's a lot of guitar in there, courtesy of Midge Ure. So it's really hard to label it, but it's somewhere in there. There's synth pop in there, there's post-punk, there's new romantic. It's just everything, but it's moody. It's wonderful. This was an album produced by Connie Plank, and of course the title track is one of their most famous songs called Vienna. But it's also got Sleepwalk, Passing Strangers, the two songs I mentioned, All Stood Still, New Europeans. This is a 2 CD version. As you can see, it has a bunch of bonus tracks. Now, just several years ago, they did put out a box set version, and that features 5 CDs and a DVD-R. And this is the Steven Wilson remix, a remastered version of the original mix, plus cassette mixes, monitor mixes, non-album tracks, B-sides, remixes. It's got tons of stuff on it, and you can see it all there, but it's really hard to see, obviously, with the white light. But it's an amazing collection, and it gives you a whole new appreciation of this wonderful album. Also available, I believe it came out Record Store Day, is the Steven Wilson remix of the album on disc 1, and then there is a previously unreleased instrumental remix of the album on the second disc, and that is only available here. Might be available separately on vinyl as well, but on CD, that instrumental mix of the album was not on the box set. 1981, out comes the album Rage in Eden, also produced by Connie Plank, and this was stylistically very different. Whereas the first album, had a more defined sound, this one here was more varied and experimental. Sounded closer to what they were doing with Visage than it did with Vienna, but still a wonderful album, moody. On some days, this is my favorite Ultravox album because it still surprises. So many different layers in there. It's really actually wonderful. Some of the popular tracks on this, I gotta make sure you can see the tracks there. You've got The Voice, We Stand Alone, The Thin Wall, I Remember Death in the Afternoon. The interesting thing is the song Rage in Eden. If you listen to the song Rage in Eden, and you'll hear chanting, during the chorus or whatever you want to call it. And there's this, sort of sounds almost like Gregorian chant or something. But then one day I noticed, that sounds like it's backwards. So back in the vinyl days, I stopped the turntable and I spun it backwards. And it's actually the chorus to I Remember Death in the Afternoon played backwards. So if you haven't tried that and you've got vinyl, I don't recommend you ruining your vinyl for that. But that is a little nugget that I haven't really heard anybody talk about, but it actually does exist. The chorus of Rage in Eden, that chanting in the background, is I Remember Death in the Afternoon backwards. But this is a great 2 CD set, and it does have a lot of B-sides and non-album tracks. But there is also a 5 CD and DVD-R version of Rage in Eden. Great box set. This contains the remaster of the original mix, the Steven Wilson remix. Now, they couldn't find original masters of 2 of the songs, so Steven Wilson only remixed the other 7 or 8 tracks on it. So you don't get a complete remix of the album because he didn't have access to the master tapes. But still, it's really a wonderful set. And of course, on the DVD-R, you get all the bonus stuff, and you can listen to it in 5.1 surround. And there are bonus things in here like pictures and all that kind of stuff in all of these box sets. So they're definitely worth your time, especially if you are a fan of these albums. Ultravox, Rage in Eden. There was also a Record Store Day version of Rage in Eden as well, and this, of course, has the Steven Wilson remixes of the album, minus those 2 tracks I just told you about, and an instrumental version of the album. So there you go. There is a 2 CD version of that. I believe it was Record Store Day only. You might be able to get the instrumental version on vinyl. I usually don't pay attention to vinyl, so I apologize, but you might be able to find it. Definitely check it out. 1982, out comes the album Quartet, their most commercial. Some days this is my favorite, some days it's not. Again, it just depends on what mood I'm in. But this album was produced by George Martin. Yeah, the same guy that produced America. Oh, yeah, and the Beatles, too. But this is just jam-packed with great pop. This is an album that features him, Reap the Wild Wind, We Came to Dance, Visions in Blue, so many great songs. And the closer on the album, called The Song We Go, is a corker as well. And this is the 2 CD version, has a bunch of bonus tracks. And of course, like the previous 2 releases, there is a 6 CD DVD-R version of it. And again, Steven Wilson remix of the album, the original mix, lots of live unreleased tracks, cassette mixes, monitor mixes, and of course, the 5.1 mix. And it's such a great collection. And some days I think this is their most commercial album. The next album came out in 1984, and that was called Lament. That's produced by Ultravox themselves, and this has great songs like White China and Lament. Heart of the Country is one of my favorites. One Small Day, and of course the song that they're probably best known for in America, called Dancing with Tears in My Eyes. This is the 2 CD version, and it contains loads of bonus tracks. I'm sure that this is going to get that expanded remix, the Steven Wilson, the box set. It's just not out yet, but this is a great album. Definitely check it out. It's a lot moodier than Quartet. Sometimes this is my favorite Ultravox album. I guess it just depends on what day I'm listening to it. Then after that album, towards the end of the year, towards Christmas time, they put out something called The Collection. Now, the collection was, a collection of their singles, of their hits, but it also had a new song called Love's Great Adventure, one of my favorite Ultravox songs. I love it. It's so fun. And it continues where Lament left off. Lament was a little moodier. This is a little more upbeat, but sound-wise, it sounded like it could have come from those sessions. And then something happened along the way. Drummer Warren Kahn was no longer in the band, and they brought in Mark Brzezinski from Big Country to play drums, and that gave it a whole different feel. They still brought in Connie Plank to produce the album, and they called it U-Vox. And this does not sound like Ultravox at all. It sounds more like a Midge Ure solo album. It's much more rocky. there's not a lot of Billy Currie's classic keyboards and stuff. I mean, they're there, but they're buried behind these great drums. I mean, Mark from Big Country is a great drummer, but it kind of overpowers everything. And this is a 2 CD version. And I mean, there are some really good songs on the album. In fact, there's a song that the Chieftains come in and play with the members of Ultravox. And it's just not, it's definitely not a gateway album, but one that you need to have if you are a fan of Midge and Ultravox. It came out in 1986, and that was the last album before the classic lineup split up. Midge Ure went off to a solo career, and he's put out some great albums. Billy Currie eventually decided to throw together a new version of Ultravox. I mean, heck, he was in the original lineup. They brought in a new vocalist, and they became even more popular. Who knows? Maybe lightning could strike 3 times. But it didn't. They put out an album called Revelation in 1993, and that album featured vocals from Tony Fanelli or something. And then there's an album called Ingenuity, and that album featured vocals from Sam Blue. They are both contained on this CD. They were released separately, but I have a 2 CD set that has both albums on it. It's not the Midge Ure era, so I'm not really going to talk about it, but it did come out between the U-Vox album and their reunion album in 2012. They had actually reunited in 2008, and they did some tours, and this was an album of all new material. It sounds like Ultravox. I'm a little disappointed overall because Midge Ure's voice is mixed a little bit down in the mix, but still, it's that classic Ultravox sound updated, and it has Midge Ure, it has Warren, and it has Billy Currie, and it has Chris Cross, and it is a fine album. It is, in my opinion, it just continues along with what the older Ultravox was doing, not the U-Vox sound, but the Quartet, Lament type sound, but more modern. It's not just copying all that kind of stuff. And that came out in 2012, and that is it. After this album came out, the band split again, and as far as I know, we're probably never going to hear all 4 of those members together. An amazing band, and they had some great producers, and they put out some great albums. And if you've never heard them before, please sit back and relax, because I have put together a medley that I want you to hear, featuring just snippets of songs from all the albums that Ultravox recorded with Midge Ure. So dig this, and I will see you on the other side.
The feeling is gone, only you and I, it means nothing to me. This means nothing to me. Oh, Vienna. Sleepwalk. 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 much to me I couldn't understand. That's how the game is meant to be. Those great adventures stories of love. Stories and life. When you all press the buttons, just where will you be when we all fall down? All in one day. All in one day. When the hand shakes down, don't you know you're meant to live again? Soon to find your road to everything. Don't you turn around and make the change. Turn around and love will happen. Could you live it
Anyway, that's it. I really hope that you enjoyed this sort of travelogue through the Midge Ure era Ultravox catalog. It's such great music. You should really check it out, either the remasters, the 2 CD ones, or the box sets, if that is your bag. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, to ring that bell for future notifications. And until the next time, remember me. I'm Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie.